I'm Microsoft teaming with Microsoft Teams. I'm learning and dreaming with Microsoft Teams. The hub and the teamwork of Microsoft 365 in these quarantine times. I'm Microsoft teaming with Microsoft Teams. Yeah, with Microsoft Teams.
Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining. At Ignite a few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to do a roundtable with some of our past guests, Envision Technologies, Lego, DSA, Polaris, and we shared their journey of planning, deploying, adopting, managing, and securing Microsoft Teams and answered questions from our audience. Now, I heard from many of you that attendance was limited, that it was capped, and I felt horrible. So I'm excited to share part one of two here with you today. So without any further ado, here's part one of our Ignite Roundtable. Thank you, everyone, for joining our session. This is the roundtable discussion, the Microsoft Teams Journey Roundtable with IT executives. I am Stephen Rose. I am a senior PMM with Microsoft. I've been with the company now a little over 14 years. I have worked on Windows. I have worked on Surface, OneDrive, SharePoint, Microsoft 365, and all that brought me to working here on the Teams group, where I've been for the last year and a half. I am also the host of a show called Inside Microsoft Teams. For those of you that have had a chance to check that out, you will realize that all of our guests today have been previous guests on the show. So Microsoft Code of Conduct is, we ask that before every session that you're aware of this and that you are respectful to all of our fellow attendees and guests. We appreciate it. Virtual environment. If you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand. Use the raise hand button and I will call on you and we'll give you an opportunity. Or if you would like to type it into chat, if you're feeling a little shy, that is absolutely fine. This is a non-NDA session as well, so we are recording it. These are all non-Microsoft employees that we are chatting with, so we'll get into that. But yeah, raise your hand if you have a question, and we will answer it. So what's our context for today? The context for today is for every IT pro who has reached out to me and said, don't tell me why, Teams, tell me how. What are the best practices? What have folks done that can help me to better pilot, manage, deploy, secure teams, and most of all, drive adoption within our organization? And all of these guests today have done some pretty amazing things around that. So what I'm going to do is introduce our guests one by one. So we'll start with Dave Patrick. Dave, how are you today?
Doing great, sir. How you doing?
I am doing fantastic. It's Ignite, and we're talking about lots of cool stuff today. So it's great. Take a moment and talk about yourself. Dave's specialty is really with working with a lot of our government customers, Department of Justice and Army. Take a few moments and tell us about yourself and a little bit about your background, Dave.
Right. So my name's Dave Patrick. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer, MVP, MCSD. I do a lot of certifications. I work with the Army mainly, but also the entire DoD. My company, DSA, we're DoD contractors. We have offices across the U.S. And I focus, on Office 365, SharePoint. I'm a SharePoint administrator, developer, trainer. And, one of the biggest challenges recently due to the pandemic was that we had to quickly switch over to Microsoft Teams. So it was challenging, but fun. It was exciting. And we learned a lot of lessons through that.
And your daughter is also a geek rock star and also appeared on our show.
Yes, absolutely. She's MVP in the making, hopefully.
Yes. Absolutely. She spent the summer doing Teams training, which was awesome. So really cool stuff. All right, Todd, we'll go to you next. Todd, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about Envision and what you do.
Sure. So I am Todd Knopp. I'm the founder and CEO of Envision Technology Advisors. We're a Microsoft partner, a Microsoft Gold partner, in fact, in Rhode Island. And we have clients all over the United States, and we specialize in the human side of Microsoft technologies. Of course, we've got folks on the identity side of the world and security, as every responsible partner should. But the part I really am focused on and most excited about is the human-centric component of, not just how we transform work, but how we transform ourselves to meet that new landscape. We took on a project, and it's how I actually met you, Stephen. We took on a project at the beginning of the pandemic where one of our customers had a very large, 500 kids, in fact, internship program that needed to go from being live in the field to being fully virtual. And we had a little under 5 weeks from the day they called us to design, implement, train on and create an ecosystem that these kids could work in. And they were, by the way, being paid for these internships. So there was, I think, $2.5 million on the table of payment to these kids. So it was no small feat. We pulled it off in just under a month, and like everyone else, learned a ton about the adoption side of the world there. So can't wait to tell you guys more about it.
Yeah. All right, Tim. Tim has been our most recent guest on our show that aired last week from Polaris up in Chile, Minnesota. So,
all right. Well, so, I don't have that cool background of the changing leaves because they're all falling off here in Minnesota. In fact, I mentioned that there was some white crystally stuff falling from the sky last night, I think it was. So we're not looking forward to the snow. Oh, but I am, because I can ride a snowmobile. So here at Polaris, I'm a DCIO of our boats, our parts, our garments, our accessories, our Gov Defense, and our commercial North America spaces. But more importantly for today, really, I'm the product line leader for our employee space, the modern workplace. And our journey to go from our previous platform to Teams actually started before COVID. So luckily, we were down that road pretty far. And when COVID hit, I said, hey, guys, we got this. And it's been a really nice journey for us to roll out Teams and SharePoint spaces and use a lot of the other dynamic space environments that can be created through SharePoint and Teams.
awesome. And certainly speaking of snowy places,
Yes.
Lego up in, near the top of the planet. Is it snowing by you yet?
Yes, Ulrik here from Lego, based in Denmark, which is a Nordic region of Europe. Quarter to midnight almost, so if I'm a bit tired, that's why. I'm lead engineer for our identity and access management team at the Lego, not dealing with bricks, identities, but have been a part of our 6-year journey in Office 365, where I met Stephen 4 or 5 years ago. You visited us, and we talked a lot about OneDrive at that time, and now transition into Teams. And I have the experience of enabling Teams in a pandemic, so reach out, and all the knowledge I have of that, I would like to share that.
Yeah, excellent. So thank you very much, everyone. For those of you who joined the session a little late, this is an interactive session. I have 1 or 2 questions, but it really is for the questions that you would like to ask our guests on how they dealt with pilot, deploy, manage, secure, and driving adoption of Teams. I ask that you do raise your hand. I'll call on you, just like we did back in school, and we'll let you ask the questions. But I'd like to go around and ask for each of you, what was the biggest challenge that you faced during your Teams deployment? And some of you did this before COVID hit, some during. So Dave, I'll start with you, dealing with the US government, which is not known for their speedy execution of much of anything. Exactly. How did that work out for you? What was the biggest challenge that you ran into?
Yeah, the biggest for us was training. The speed of it was challenging. So we were forced into it. Everyone was sent home. We're going to be remote, and now we had to get these people up and running using Teams. It was new to just about everybody in the government. And one of the tools that we used that helped us a lot was a site from Microsoft, teamsdemo.microsoft.com, or it's teamsdemo.office.
It's now transform.microsoft.com. It's our CDX site. Yeah.
And
which, by the way, is available to everybody. So you can check it out later.
Right. And that way we could tell people, go to this site, walk through it, get a little bit of hands-on. A lot of the videos on Microsoft Learn were really, really beneficial to get people, because we just couldn't do it all ourselves. We did adopt a champions program that helped us, where we had other people that were tech savvy. They would turn around and teach their team. So we would do a lot of train the trainer sessions. And we did divide and conquer was the order of the day.
Awesome. All right, Todd, we'll move to you. Same question. What was the biggest challenge that you faced during your Teams deployment?
So I think it would be easy to claim that the time frame was the hardest, but in reality, that actually was not the biggest problem. We only had 4 weeks to get it done, but the biggest issue was actually the audience. We were deploying for 400 and change students that were juniors and seniors in high school. There was a random selection for who would be in that. There was a lottery, essentially, for who could be admitted into this program. A lot of these were low-income households that didn't have access to good endpoints. Plus, every one of these kids came out of Google schools. So they had zero experience in the Microsoft ecosystem. And one of the first things that we had to figure out was how to get bandwidth to the people who needed it, who didn't have good access to that stuff at home, because absolutely nothing kills adoption faster than having the wrong equipment at the endpoint. So we actually put together headsets, backpacks, devices, even MiFi's, mobile access points that we cut custom deals with cellular providers to make sure we had enough capacity and bandwidth for these kids. That was actually probably our biggest challenge.
Somebody had asked about, thank you. Somebody asked about the transform.microsoft.com. It is for end users, partners, MVPs. Anybody can access that. And what it does is it gives you a virtual environment that you can set up with data so that you can actually train users with it. And that is good for several weeks, and then you can refresh it. But it's also great if you want to do a demo, but actually have an environment with people in it. So that always works well.
And Stephen, I should mention, there was another site that went hand in hand. It was that teamsdemo.office.com, which provided that click-through where you didn't even have to install anything. People were just able to kind of get used to the interface. So that both of those sites helped immensely.
And those are now all on MS Learn, which is great. And I'll show those links at the end for that. Also, learning pathways. Did anybody use the learning pathways to be able to set up? Dave, you want to take a moment and talk about that? Because we had a question on that.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the learning pathways from Microsoft Learn.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, those are just fantastic. So my side job is I teach at the University of Maryland, and we do college courses. There's, each week we have a class. The learning pathways are just like college courses. I mean, they have units, they have knowledge checks, which are like little exam preparations. They've got tutorials where you can do hands-on. They're phenomenal. We really use those for some more of our site admins, the content owners. So not just the regular users, but anyone that needs to go into Teams and then get behind the scenes and play with the SharePoint site that's behind the team. That was another thing that kind of threw people for a loop, is they kind of looked at Teams and SharePoint as two distinct entities, and we kind of had to get them over that hump and say, no, here's how they integrate, here's how they work together, and the learning pathway help them overcome that or kind of figure that out.
Tim, same question.
Yeah, so I'll tell you what worked well, because it sets up what didn't work well. So what worked really well is people were able to launch Teams on whatever device they're used to using, their iPad, their iPhone, their computer, quickly get up to speed with understanding how to chat and become productive, find a team, create a team, which can lead to sprawl. During COVID, when everyone's at home, it was almost seemed too easy at times. Introduce coming back to the office, and now we have fancy conference rooms with competing product hardware inside those conference rooms. Getting teams to work in some of those conference rooms was difficult at first. We were trying to do that all through no intermediary third party. We found that putting a third party software between not only addressed having that proprietary software and hardware in our conference rooms, making Teams available, but it also opened the door to all other technologies. So that was our biggest challenge, is getting in conference rooms to work with Teams, because we didn't swap out all the hardware.
Okay.
Yes. Back in when you released Teams at Lego, we were asked the day after actually to when are you going to enable this in our tenant. I think that was quite surprising for us. And with 12,000 users with an E5 license, after I think 4 months, we had 3,000 regular users of that, even though we're using Skype for Business as at that point in time as our primary platform. And we just saw the adoption keep going, because the video and audio quality was much better than our on-premise Skype for Business. Our main issue was that just like you, Tim, the video interrupt with our video equipment was not really working. So from that point of view, we had to keep on a Skype for Business until our Teams platform was ready for interrupt with our video equipment. But then COVID hit, and we made a decision that, okay, everybody's out of the meeting rooms, they're working from home, so let's shift from Teams to instead of Skype for Business, and we did that, I would say, within a month. Actually making sure that everybody was using that platform, making sure default meeting invites in Outlook, etc., was Teams. And then after half a year, we switched to a Teams-only mode, and just checked that the past 30 days, there have been 81 Skype for Business call outside of the company. So that's where we are now.
Wow.
I think maybe the world is Teams instead of a few years ago it was we need to Zoom, right? I think someone you said that, and that was the story to begin with. That was why can't I use Zoom, because that's much better than Skype for Business, and let's try the Teams instead. I would also say why we're so confident we could just enable it was we had actually secured our Office 365 platform before just let the users go ahead using the platform, and I think that was really great for us. So we could just let them run and work with the platform.
And one of the things that I loved about Lego when I was out in Billund and actually had a chance to visit was when we first chatted, was all of your folks saying, yeah, we've already turned that on. And we're like, you've already turned that feature on. That they were, if there was a new feature, when Stream came out, they immediately embraced it. Teams, etc. Their toys are very much about collaboration, and they are internally. And their mindset is, if it helps us to be more collaborative, and this is long before COVID, when you were all still in the offices, you were really, really open to, leveraging that and bringing that to fruition. So you were always looking to bring in that new stuff. But that leads into the question that I want to ask everybody, which is about security. So how did you look at security, and how did that change during COVID? Because the goal, and I've spoken to all of you about this, is to allow people to work from anywhere on any device securely. If they want to use an iPad, if they want to use an Android phone, whatever it is, you can't limit that because people are at home with kids or at a Starbucks or waiting in a parking lot to get things done. How did they bring that together? So especially now, since identity and access is such a key thing for you, Oleg, I think it's great for you to kind of take that question first, which is how did you look at security before and after the pandemic?
Yeah, I think it was both. It was before, Stephen, because we actually started purchasing laptops for everybody 10 years ago. So we didn't have desktops, so people could just carry their computer with them at home and work from that. And but we have some strict compliance rules around. You have to work if you have native access to the core platform, then you need to have a managed device from us. So that was setting up the conditional access policy in our Azure tenant and making sure that compliant devices have access. And then, of course, working with partners as guests in our Azure tenant. So we easily adopted the way of thinking with external users inside our teams, allowing them to have access with multi-factor. And then, go from there. So we don't allow... For now, I will talk maybe a little bit about that later, but we do not allow bring your own device for the Teams platform, only if you are attending a meeting,
Okay.
not for collaborating.
Can they use it on web, or you don't even allow it via web?
We don't allow it via web yet.
Okay. Tim, same question to you, because I know that you have an older and newer mix of hardware at Polaris, so I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are around that.
Yeah, so a few things. One, we really opened up the door. We initially thought we wanted to control everything through a VPN, and then you funnel through to all the environments, including Microsoft. We quickly realized, why constrain our own networks and our own hardware when a lot of this can go direct to the Azure? So we implemented multi-factor authentication to really help cut back on any concern of someone having someone else's credentials. And we made sure that that multi-factor truly does have, it requires you to interact live within a certain period of seconds in order to continue the login process. And then we would cache that and then re-ask for that about once a week. It would not be every time you logged in. We kind of made the decision not to make it that painful. Mm-hmm. But of course, some of the advanced features and I can't go into all the depth, but some of the Microsoft security features that also helps track down, are you logging in in Minnesota and suddenly you're logging in New York City. It's impossible. That's an impossible traveler. So we turned on that capability to really track down if we have anybody, using multiple devices, maybe someone else in their family, they gave the password to. So we kind of turned on Microsoft's technology from tip to tail to try to track all that down. We eliminated a lot of the other third-party package software when it comes to Teams and the overall Azure environment. We used all native Microsoft tech.
Okay. Actually, there's another great question, and Robert brings this one up. Did anyone here stand up or leverage a champion network to drive adoption? If so, what tools were used to manage, promote the champion? And we talked about that on the show, that you leveraged that. I know that was Sheila's whole thing, but if you could take a moment and sort of recap a little bit of that, that would be great for Robert. And Robert, watch the show. It's a really good interview.
So the Champions program really started as, started small. Pick individuals that are very adept to change and are very vocal within the groups. Really champion how to champion the Champions program. So get their feedback. What would they suggest in your culture, in your environment that would work? So they help construct the broader Champions program. You create a team site, you have open dialogue, you make sure you're attentive to questions that are asked on the site. You seed a few questions here and there to keep it alive. So it really takes some nurturing in the beginning, but it caught on like wildfire. I would say it went from an idea to a point where, wow, we knew we were on something within a month and a half, 2 months. The first meeting, you have 12 people. The second meeting, it was like in the 20 range. By the third meeting, we were thinking, oh my gosh, are we going to push the limits of Teams, because we had over 100 people joining and we hadn't quite gotten that far into Teams to know what it would do with that many attendees. So, it's really word of mouth. And, there's something neat about the way Microsoft is now rolling out enhancements. I mean, they're constantly coming. People are looking forward to change. They want to be part of that change. So we try to talk through those things before they're rolled out, or if they're rolled out, we talk about it on the site. They want then to be part of further communicating before we send out emails or other types of training material. So we give them about a week heads up before we send out the training material and the emails. So I think it's really their inclusion, their involvement that helps drive the adoption of a Champions program. There's so much I could go into, though. I could spend an hour talking about the Champions program.
No, really, thank you for that, because right now we are kind of an analysis paralysis, right? It's the thing you said that really struck me is bring the first group in and ask them what this should look like and how this should work, right? Every company is different, cultures are different. And I think to me that was the most useful thing I heard so far here. Everything was great, but that just convinced me to just move forward and don't be afraid. You don't have to have all the answers.
One thing I say to a lot of IT folks is we tend to think black and white, on or off, one or zeros. But there's 500 million trillion shades of gray in between. When you bring in the right people, they help you navigate the gray. And that's what you need to do. You need to bring in those folks to help you navigate that gray space.
Perfect. Thank you.
We did a whole show on driving adoption with a change management expert from Cargill. And the one thing that we both landed on and stressed is, if you as the person or whoever is in charge of that team's rollout does not understand the individual jobs that people do, what they do every day, and how Teams will affect them, you're never going to be able to talk them into using it. But when you walk in and say, hey, here's what you do, here's how Teams is going to help you or make this better or make this less painful. Somebody said, be a doctor, understand where people's pain is and how this will help to reduce that pain is one of the biggest things. Dave, I see you shaking your head a lot. You obviously have a thought here, so why don't you share it?
Yeah,
and this is great, by the way. Thank you, everybody, for typing in your questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can.
Yeah, just to follow on what Tim was saying, the Champions program was wildfire. We actually hit the limit for the members in a team, and had to have a second team of champions just because we had so many people. We gave them enhanced permissions, and that way they were sort of able to try things out before other people. So that was kind of the carrot to get people to sign up to be a champion. But yeah, that's what probably the number one lesson we got from our champions was, well, this is how they're doing their job, and this is how you can help them. Can team help them remove that pain? Can it be less clicks? Can it be? And so that's when we started thinking, okay, for this group, if they use it this way, this group's focusing on meetings, this one's focusing on storing files in the SharePoint, but then co-authoring on the file, that, so each group was different, and we really needed to understand what their jobs were and how teams would remove some of that pain, and that was the success.
Yeah. Awesome.
Hey, Stephen.
Yeah, please.
Just listening to the conversation, I mean, these guys are speaking my language anyway, but I'm watching the conversation in the meeting chat about reluctant users and the difficulty of getting people on board. We've got, literally hundreds of customers we do this with. One of the things that we tell people in the early stages of teams is not our saying, and I should probably look up who actually coined this, but we say people don't resist change, they resist being changed.
Yeah.
More often than not, that model of presuming that we know what people need and want to be productive and happy in their work environment, designing it, putting it in front of them and saying, here, we baked you this pie without asking you whether or not you have any allergies, rarely works, right? Getting those really difficult users, those people that are going to be naturally resistant, engaged at the design level, helps them to have ownership and adoption and really become advocates when they otherwise would have been detractors.
All right, that's the end of part 1. I know you're ready for part 2, so it's right below this one. So just click on it, check it out. And if you have any questions or suggestions, as always, just reach out to me directly. Go to part 2. We'll see you there.